Welcome back. Welcome to my second finance video. The first one was what has government done to our money, and the second one is why has government debased our money, debt, delusion and the cost of control. So the first video that I made around finance was called what has government done to our money, and specifically why the pound buys less each year. And I explained a little bit about what money was, or what money is, medium of exchange, a unit of account, and crucially a store of wealth. And I argued that the store of wealth of fiat currencies is declining very dramatically, very quickly right now as we speak. And I gave the example of a Disney dollar. So when you went to Disneyland, you gave them money, you got your Disney dollars, which looked like fiat currency, but obviously has Mickey Mouse on them, and you could use those within the actual grounds, within Disneyland Paris, wherever you are, you could use those notes as money, and they operated as money like that in those places. It was accepted because they said it was legal tender and everyone agreed to trust it, in the same way that governments have the same thing, in that they produce currency and people agree to use it and trust it. However, unlike gold or silver, fiat money, fiat currency, has no intrinsic value. It's basically just a government dollar or government unit of account, just like Disney dollars are issued by Disney. So government pounds or dollars are issued by the governments that are in power, or the system that's in power at the time. There's not an intrinsic value to them. They are just valued because we all agree that they are, which is different to monetary metals. So why has government done what they've done to our money or to our currency? Well, here's a copy of the national debt that was last day of September, so it's a few days ago now, and you'll notice, we'll draw your attention to the UK, 4.2 trillion in debt, and public debt to GDP ratio 114%. You can also see the US debt there is at 37 trillion, with GDP, gross domestic product, at 30 trillion. So again, it's 100% public debt to GDP. What does that matter? Well, basically it means that we're kind of in a debt trap. Governments are spending more than they earn. So in the UK, we have a 2.6 trillion pound deficit. USA deficit is $37 trillion. And what we're doing is we're producing more fiat currency, and we're using that to basically fund our debt. And because of that, inflation is a hidden tax, as I explained in the previous video. So there's a credit analyst called Rick Rule, focuses on the mining sector, and he draws this distinction, which I want to make here, between liquidity and solvency. So if you have a job paying maybe £60,000 a year, maybe you've got £30,000 in saving as well, it might sound like that's quite good, but you have a mortgage of £1 million. Well, you have money to buy beer and go shopping. In other words, you're liquid, you have liquidity. But the problem is you can't service a debt of £1 million for your mortgage. So you're liquid, but you're not solvent. And our situation globally is we have liquidity because they print this fiat currency, but arguably we are not solvent. So a country can stay liquid by printing money or borrowing more, but that doesn't mean that it's solvent. Solvency is about the big picture. We're piling up obligations we can never realistically repay. And that's the deeper risk hidden behind the ticking debt clock that you saw there. So how does this actually end? How does this debt trap end? There's two ways, essentially. You can reprice debt securities. So say you owe someone £100, for example. You can turn around and say, I don't have the £100, I'll give you £50 back to cover that debt. So you're basically asking those people who lent you money to take a haircut, that's what they call it. Or you can revalue the denominator, which means that you reprice the currency that the debt is issued in. So you owe £100, you're the government, you don't have the £100, so you just print up more currency and pay that person that £100 that you've just printed. Obviously, the issue with that is the devaluation of the currency, as explained in the previous video. So governments like to pretend that inflation is a problem, But actually, it's helpful to a government that's in debt because it helps them pay off their debts. And when this happens and people see that their money is going less and less, going not as far as it used to, their purchasing power is diminishing, the electorate generally look for something or someone to scapegoat, and usually they'll scapegoat others, not recognizing that the real issue is the debasement of the currency. And my argument here is government finance is spinning out of control, and they have the debts that they can't really finance. So that is where the issue is and where people are stuck. So in terms of the debt trap, according to Ray Dalio and lots of other people as well, Ray Dalio is an excellent hedge fund billionaire who's now taken his time to really explain and educate to people how the financial system works. Well worth checking him out if you haven't. The debt cycle is reaching a painful stage, and he argues specifically about the UK and the USA that we're heading into very, very dark times. And he talks about basically 5 things that happen when you have 5 major forces that drive history in cycles: money and debt force, internal conflict, geopolitical conflict, acts of nature, human inventiveness, particularly technology. And he argues that the US and UK are exhibiting clear symptoms of a debt cycle nearing its dangerous phase. The UK has a financial problem, the government has a debt problem. So he argues as well that the same for America, except that America also has a culture of entrepreneurship and innovation, which he argues that the UK doesn't have anymore. So currency printing is much easier than financial discipline. Yeah, each fix of printing more currency erodes the long-term trust in the currency, but people don't really see that. What they see is prices rising, and rather than their currency being devalued. One of the other things that can happen here is that we can get into, as a way of bringing the country together, we get into conflicts with other countries, and this is quite common when people, or when we have economic hardship, we start blaming others, as detailed really well in a book called War is a Racket by Smedley Butler. Printing money or currency funds endless wars. When you can't afford to pay for it, you just print up the currency. And there's an excellent book written in the 1800s, I believe, called Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds, which kind of goes to show what happens when you have mass currency printing and you have bubbles start forming all over the place in different asset classes where people rush in to chase up the price of certain goods or services. So bubbles form, bull runs, it's altered states of euphoria, FOMO, desire not to miss out on these outsized gains. And you'll see there at the bottom, there's a little chart which shows you the movement of assets when they go into a bubble. You have a stealth phase, you have an awareness phase, suddenly you get this mania phase where you get media attention, you get people become enthusiastic about this particular narrative or story, the public get involved as well, then you get greed, then delusion, and the whole thing goes up and goes crazily high, and you get this supposed new paradigm. It's different this time because, and that is when you get a reversal in the markets or in whatever the asset class, the bubble that has risen up. So Major General Smedley D. Butler says this: war is a racket, always has been. It's possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. Profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses are in lives. So he goes, a racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to the majority of people. Only a small inside group knows what it's about. It's conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the very many. And you could argue that currency debasement is hidden to most people, but is engineered by elites who benefit from this system. If you're a billionaire or a multi-millionaire, the fact that prices in the shops for your shopping have gone up dramatically doesn't make a whole lot of difference to you, because you've got plenty of the currency to use to be able to get your goods and services. If you're a person on a fixed income and you see currency is being devalued, which means prices are going up, it's harder and harder for you to afford the things every day that you actually need. So one of the ways we can kind of get people to come together is by maybe starting a war, looking at enemies, either enemy within or the enemies externally. And once again, Smedley Butler says this: the normal profits of a business concern are 6, 8, 10, sometimes 12%. But during wartime profits, that's another matter. 20, 60, 100, 300, even 800%. The sky is the limit. Extreme profits happen when power, military or monetary, are misused, similar to what happens when governments print money unchecked. I want to just completely talk about something slightly different about forced reality. And this is something when a person holds onto a belief or illusion despite clear warning signs that that's not actually the case, until external circumstances impose the truth on them. At that point, they can't ignore reality anymore. So clinging to a belief that blinds us, people and governments maybe ignore warning signs until there's a collapse. They're being wedded to an illusion. So, for example, currency printing is fine. It has no negative benefit, no negative effects. Obviously, as I've explained to you, there's plenty of negative effects, but people or governments might try and pretend that there isn't. So fiat printing paper currency is the illusion, and in fact inflation and the debt are the reality or the consequence of what happens. In terms of having a forced reality, you have these certain characteristics: a denial of warning signs, people believing everything is fine even when evidence shows otherwise, being attached to an idea, married to a position or a worldview that makes it hard to adapt or see something different. And when reality imposes itself, eventually the market, the economy or life forces the truth on you. And by that time, it's too late and reality is accepted, but it's too late. The opportunity's gone, or the collapse has happened, or money or currency or your wealth is actually gone. So why has government done this to our money? Why has government debased the currency to paper over its debts, to fund its wars, and to keep the financial illusion alive just a little bit longer? But illusions always end, whether in a market climax, a euphoria, then a crash, or a forced reality. And when they do, it's ordinary people like you and me that are left to pay the price. So when money is an illusion, reality always collects the debt. And governments debase money for power, but it's you and me ultimately who pays when reality crashes that party. Just going back to Ray Dalio for a second, one of the things that he talks about, financially, individuals should focus on building strength through disciplined earnings, spending and savings, paired with smart investing. So on a personal level, Dalio advises people to understand their own nature and find a path in life that aligns with it. So for those early in their careers, he emphasises the priority should be learning from the best possible mentors, not chasing the highest paying jobs. And crucially, the most fulfilling lives, he argues, comes from having meaningful work and meaningful relationships, and that correlates more strongly with happiness than having vast amounts of money. And that's something that I'm going to look at in future videos. So I'd like to thank you for listening and listening to the end. Please give me a like or a tick or whatever it is on YouTube that they like. If you'd like to protect yourself and learn more about currency and money, please watch my first video and also my top macroeconomic sites, which is another video I did, a short one. And please subscribe if you would like to. Thank you for listening, and I'll speak to you again some point soon.